But I just thought, well, okay, he's getting into my elevator. Maybe he just mumbled, oh, we live in the same floor, and I didn't understand. And then when we're in the elevator, he just had this, I had this feeling there's something not quite right here.
Czar Experience.
Привет from Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. This is the Czar Experience, and welcome back to another Vodka Vodcast with me, Connor Klein. And in today's episode, we're going to be going into 3 times I felt afraid and scared in dodgy Ukraine. Now, I guess for people who haven't been here before to Ukraine, there's a lot of stories. We're in the wild east of Europe. There's all these, I guess, stereotypes about rough mafiosi and it's dodgy and it's dangerous and whatnot. Now, of course, like any country that isn't basically a complete police state where people can't do anything at all, Ukraine does have crime. But overall, as you see, I'm here in Kiev, in the center of the city, just near to the Taras Shevchenko University. This is Shevchenko Park, and it's pretty tranquil, relaxed. It's not a country where personally I feel insecure overall, but you know, I've been hanging out here on and off for over a decade, and sometimes you run into a few situations. So I'm going to go into that today. 2 of them happened to me personally, and then the third one is actually one that happened to another guy. An American guy was here, and I think it's an important story to share with you so that you know exactly what to watch out for. Make sure you avoid any very uncomfortable situations. There are dangerous situations here in Ukraine. Now, as I said, in the center of cities here, I don't feel insecure at all. In fact, I feel safer here than I do if I'm in the United Kingdom or if I'm back in Ireland where I was born, especially late at night in Ireland. If you're in the center of a city, a lot of drunk people who tend to be aggressive and violent. UK, the same thing. I know, you know, I've lived in the US and I've lived in different parts of Europe, so I can say that actually here, I kind of feel the safest probably of all the places I've lived in. That said, the first incident happened on my first trip. Now, I've spoken about this in length on one of my earlier vodcasts, one of the first vodcasts I did here. And we must be up to almost 90 vodcasts at this stage, so it's way back. It's probably number 4 or 5 or something like that. So I'm going to link it down below in the description, also up in the cards. If you haven't seen that one yet, go watch it, because it is the vodcast that my clients who come and live the Czar Experience with me in person actually refer to the most. So in short, in that podcast is one of the things I talk about happened on my very first trip to Ukraine. So this is back, I'm always forgetting if it was 2008 or 2009, but it's over 10 years ago. And back in those days, obviously before the annexation of Crimea by Russia, it was de facto part of Ukraine, still de jure part of Ukraine, but obviously it's administered by Russia in effect de facto since 2014. So this was before that, and Crimea was an autonomous republic within Ukraine, which meant that in effect, in reality, the Ukrainian government didn't have so much control over what happened, and particularly the police and crime. They weren't able to control it very well, so it has had a reputation for a bit more lawless than the rest of Ukraine. Now, back then, Ukraine was definitely a lot dodgier. It was definitely a lot less law, but it was a bit more dangerous to go to for sure. It was a lot less traveled as well by, you know, very little Western tourism in Crimea when I went there. So I went out to Crimea, and I went out in Sevastopol, or Sebastopol as we probably pronounce it in English, which is on the shores of the Black Sea. It's on the peninsula. It is not the capital of Crimea, that's Simferopol, but it's a big port city. Obviously the Russians had a naval fleet there. The Black Sea Fleet was already based there, so they had that port rented out. And you know, I went out on, it was some day during the week, and I remember that I went to a bar. There wasn't much going on in the bar, but there were 2 dancers outside. One was a guy and one was a girl, and they were kind of dancing on a podium, and they were in a little garden in front of the bar, and a lot of people had just come to watch them dance and do their stuff, and were not actually drinking in the bar itself. They were kind of drinking outside and watching it. It was actually a lot more interesting to do that than actually be in the bar. It was a bit boring actually when I went inside. So what I did is I went and I got beer. And I stood there and I was watching the dancers. Now, at a certain point, there was a girl who was near me, and I started talking to her, and then we got on pretty well. I spoke almost no Russian at the time. It was pretty difficult. I guess there was a lot of sign language being used. And we went and we took a walk. And we walked on for probably 300 or 400 meters. We stopped in a park. I had gotten the beer from a kiosk. I'd done the same. There were all these kiosks along the promenade in Sevastopol. So got another beer. We were drinking it together. A beer each. I'd seen it opened in front of me. We started to make out a bit, and then we walked on further. Now we walked on further, and I remember we're not so far from the Eternal Flame, as Sevastopol was a hero city in the Soviet Union. They tend to have these. Well, they have them all, the Eternal Flame for the people who died defending the city in the Second World War. And remember, we had a third beer there, and then we had sat down in a small little. It wasn't really a park. It was kind of like a. Well, I guess you could call it a little. Bit more than a garden, basically. And she had a little bit of beer left in her bottle, and I'd finished mine. I remember I took her bottle and I drank it down, and I said, okay, let's go to my place. It's just like, it was maybe 200 meters away at that point. So we walked along, and I remember feeling, just when I got to the door, felt a bit weird. I felt a bit drunk, and I said, I only had 3 beers. And anyways, I opened the door to the building, walked up the building with this girl, and I felt really drunk on this. I felt uneasy. I felt something is wrong. Anyways, I opened the door to the apartment, went into the apartment. At that stage, it gets very hazy in my memory what happened next. So fast forward a bit, I wake up and I remember that there was a wardrobe with a mirror. It was a mirror wardrobe. One of those, you pull back and it's got the mirror obviously in front so you can see yourself. So I woke up and I could see a little red mark on my forehead. And I was like, okay, I kind of remember something about falling over and hitting my head. And then I looked around. I saw I was naked. No girl there in the apartment. And I was like, holy fuck. What happened to me? So I immediately just assumed no girl there. I felt something was wrong, and I thought, I've been robbed, right? I mean, it's kind of the classic thing that happens in a lot of countries when you're traveling, unfortunately, is that you meet someone, they drug you, and then they steal your stuff in your apartment. I've heard some stories of that in Ukraine as well, but it seems to be pretty rare compared to other parts of the world. And there were 3 things that I was worried about. One was my new smartphone. Was the rival to the iPhone at the time. This was over 10 years ago. I think it was actually from Nokia. Imagine Nokia still been a company. That's how long ago it was. But they had some rival, and it was big actually in Eastern Europe, the rival phone that they launched, rival to the iPhone. My wallet with my money in it and my passport. Now I found my passport and my money. It was actually just on the table. I was like, okay, so I'm not really sure my money and everything is there. And then I found my phone later was actually in my bag. So I don't know how it got into my bag. My clothes I found them on the other side of the room. And then the pièce de résistance of the story. I looked at the display below the TV, and it had the first letter for each of the days of the week. Like it would be, I guess, S, or like a RC, like a S sound for Wednesday. And that's what should have been there, but in fact it was Ch, which is for Четверг, which is Thursday. And I was like, no way. I looked at my phone. I got out on Tuesday night, and now it was Thursday morning. And I actually even had to check out of my apartment because I'd only reserved it until Thursday. So I had to call the landlady, and she was like, what happened? I don't know. I got drugged or something. It's crazy. So I was out for 36 hours. But for some reason, I wasn't robbed. And yeah, I don't really know what happened. This is day even before. I mean, I guess maybe it was even before, maybe it wasn't before Facebook, but because I think the contact you had at the time. But I had no contact details for the girl. I have no idea what happened. Even to this day, all I know is that my stuff was there. I wasn't robbed, but it was pretty crazy. Now, I thought I was super paranoid afterwards. Obviously, something like that happens. I felt relieved, but I kept getting flashbacks of, walking, what happened, how was I drugged? I'd seen all the beers opened in front of me, wasn't in her beer, and I just drank it, and she also was drugged. Of course, I will never find the answer to that story unless she watches this video and then writes me a message and it says, hey, I was the girl who either drugged you or was drugged. But fast forward, like really, it's probably only 3 years ago, so we're talking 8-9 years later. I'm in Odessa, and there is an English guy, Andy, with me, and he has lived in Crimea back in the day, and he told me, yeah, this is super common. He doesn't know about my story, and he actually starts talking about how he was drugged in Sevastopol. I'm pretty sure it was Sevastopol, but anyways, it was in Crimea, and you know, he had a really crazy story because the police tried to shake him down for money. Actually, they did shake him down for money once they found the people who drugged and robbed him, but he told me it was super, super common, and that actually a significant amount of people actually disappear each year and their bodies are dumped in the sea. This was back in the day in Crimea, after they are robbed. So yeah, definitely didn't make me feel super secure, and probably just as well I didn't know that while I was staying on in Sevastopol. So that was the first time. As I said again, I have a lot more detail about that first trip. It's a super interesting one for you to watch because you know, obviously I was very naive when I came here the first time, and a lot of other things happened to me, but as I say in that, I battled through it. So there, the lesson for you to learn, obviously, and I've met other people, it's been rare enough that have been drugged here, and they weren't drugged by girls actually, they were drugged by a guy. Apparently it was a foreign guy going around befriending other foreigners and then spiking their drink and then robbing them. And actually a guy came over to me in Odessa, maybe it was about 2 or 3 years ago, and he told me it happened to him. So obviously be super careful if you don't know someone, and yeah, especially if it's a situation that feels uncomfortable and they might have put a drug in it. If you do go to obviously Crimea, maybe, I don't know what happens nowadays, if it's as common after annexation, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, and not so many foreign tourists go there anyways, but definitely just be careful if you don't know people about your drinks. I guess that's the same for everywhere in the world, but anyways, it happened to me here, and it definitely made me feel, I was already a bit paranoid. If I had known that people's bodies were being dumped in the sea, allegedly, then I would have been fucking really, really paranoid afterwards for the rest of my stay. I did hang out in Crimea and I went back. This was on the first trip. I went back 5 times, so I didn't have anything like that happen again. I learned to be a lot more attentive, I guess. But I don't know how the drug was slipped in. Could have been in my drink, could have been in her drink. That will remain a mystery. So the second time was actually the genesis for making this video. Happened to me about a month ago in dodgy Dnipro. That's why I keep using the word dodgy. I'm actually going to have a vlog from Dnipro, and I'm thinking of calling it "Is Dodgy Dnipro the Dublin of Ukraine?" Well, it should be up on the channel pretty soon. In any case, so watch out for that. Dnipro. So I was staying in the city center. Now the city center is not that big in Dnipro. Has a lot of new cafes and bars. Quite pretty cool place. And I was walking around at night a little bit. I was going to the gym, coming back, maybe going for drinks. And where my apartment was situated, just around it felt noticed to be a bit sketchy, right? There's just a lot of like what are referred to maybe here either pejoratively or kind of, I guess, affectionately as gobniks, guys who hang out wearing tracksuits, doing the squat, and yeah, kind of reputation for petty criminality, right? So a lot of these guys, doesn't mean they're all criminals, of course not, but you do have that kind of feel. There are a lot of guys walking around late at night with no apparent reason to be there. It happened a few times. People came over to me, either guys or a couple, and just asking strange questions late at night. Just had this edgy feel to it, the city, when I was walking around. I also asked local girls and guys what they feel, and said, yeah, they said it's really sketchy if you get out of the center, but even in the center they felt, yeah, you need to kind of watch your environment around you, your environs, to make sure nothing happens. So I'm staying in this building. It has security at the reception, so obviously should be more secure, and it's unusual. I stay in such a building in Ukraine in general, so this should have been, you know, super safe once I get back there. So I'm walking, and I am a little bit, you know, wary of people, and I see this guy standing outside my building. Now he's on the phone. He looks more like kind of the hipster type than a gopnik. And I walk past him, open the door, then you got the security guard on my right, got the door to go in to the building. Well, not into the building, but past the security guard. And I open the door, say hi to the security guard, and this guy comes in with me. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess the security guard would have stopped him if he doesn't live here. Get to the elevator, and the elevator has a display panel outside. So there's 3 elevators, and you press what floor, and then you go to your elevator. So I hit my thing. Then he mumbles something to me. I don't understand him. So even though my Russian is pretty good, he may have said in Russian, he may have just said in English, he could have said in Ukrainian, he could have said in Arabic, I have no idea. But I just thought, well, okay, he's getting into my elevator. Maybe he just mumbled, we live in the same floor, and I didn't understand. And then when we're in the elevator, I had this feeling there's something not quite right here. He doesn't look like he's homeless, that he doesn't live in the building, he doesn't look particularly dodgy, but there's something just a bit strange about this guy. I haven't quite figured out what it is, but he's making me feel a bit uncomfortable. He didn't say anything to me, he was staring at the ground the whole time. So anyways, we come out of the elevator obviously opens, the doors open, he's in front of me, closer to the doors. He goes out first, and he kind of just turned very slightly as he was walking. He was walking really slowly. I was like, in my head I was like going, does this guy live here? I'm not so sure he's not stopped, but he hasn't really gone to any particular direction here. So I'm starting to think, okay, let's see if he goes my direction, because it was actually a circle around. So you're either going to turn to the left and go out, or you're going to turn to the right. So he goes to the left. Mine happens to be on the left as well. It's like 3 or 4 doors down. He's walking slower and slower and slower. I was like, this is so weird. Then I put my key into my door, because we get to my door. I should say we, because this stage he was right in front of me. Put my key in my door, and immediately turns around, stares into me. I was like, "Что ты хочешь?" Like this, because I felt it was just weird the way he was looking at me. And then the guy looked like this, a little bit scared or startled by my reaction, and then just turned around and started walking on. I was like, what a weirdo. This is so odd, right? So I shouted at him, like, what do you want? And I was listening to him. I said, well, if he does live in this building, and he's just, I don't know, maybe I scared him if he just looked at me and the paranoid Irish boy in the building like snaps at him. I said, well, then he's going to stop at his room, and at his particular door, and I hear the footsteps, and it's going on and on and on, and I'm like, this is a circle. So if he doesn't live here, he's going to come right back to my door again. So I said, I'm going inside, right? So open the door, go inside, lock it, then see that my intercom doesn't work with reception. I have no idea how to call reception, because it's like, this guy's in the building and he's just been a weirdo. I mean, maybe the guy's high on drugs or something, or he's actually just there to rob people or whatnot. So I want a warm reception. Who is this guy? Get him out. So I wrote the landlord. I was renting an Airbnb. He didn't answer in the morning. It was actually a bit later. It was like maybe after. It was probably around 1 a.m. So I was like, okay, I'll just go down in the morning and find out. So I go down the next day, and I'm like, okay, this guy was here, and it was a different security guard. And he was like, oh, did he look like this? When I said, yeah. He was like, yeah, I saw that guy around. He kind of came up. He seemed lost, seemed disorientated. I was like, you guys let this, what appears to be druggie, into the building. What, are you crazy? And he followed me. So my landlord then tried to say, oh, they thought he was your friend. I was like, the guy, they knew he was hanging out outside, and they let him into the bloody building. Incompetent security. What the hell? Why do I have security if they're going to make things worse? If it was, I guess if there was no security, I wouldn't have thought that he lived in the building in the first place. I would have found him sketchier the moment I saw him behind me. So anyways, the security told me that, yeah, they looked at the cameras. He actually walked around a few times in a circle and then kind of went off the camera, and probably then came out the next morning. So this guy was high, I guess, high in drugs. Having followed me, he just probably slept in a corner and left the next day, or went murdered someone else in the building. How would I know? So that was a dodgy experience, and it's only really pertinent because of Dnipro. And as I said, it was a little bit sketchier. So that is one thing to be careful of. I think if you go off the beaten path, like you're not in a Kiev or Odessa or Lviv, if you're in a more provincial city, maybe in Kharkiv or in Dnipro, then, you know, at times it can be a little bit more old school. It's going to be a little bit rougher. You know, my last vlog was talking about Kryvyi Rih, and that was definitely edgy feel. When I went to the south of the city, I didn't say it in the vlog because it wasn't so pertinent, but it was dodgy in the south of the city, which had, you know, some of these big quarries where they mine stuff in the middle of the city. And it was, you know, they had painted it. It didn't look run down, but yeah, everybody stared at me in the street. The babushke, the grandma, 60 stared at me. I had a feeling, you're not from around here, boy. Yeah, so it was definitely a lot of drunk people at that time. It was like 4 in the afternoon, just like lying around. So just be wary that, you know, you might have come to, say, Kiev or Odessa or Lviv, and, you know, you're stuck to a more touristic experience and you didn't have any problems walking around. Now, you might have got scammed by some of the scammer girls, but that's a different thing to be wary of here in Ukraine. I have a plethora of videos about that, of course. I'll link a few of them down below, maybe 1 or 2 up in the card for you. So just be aware that in some of the cities where it's less traveled to, it's a little bit less economically developed, you can have a few problems with dodgy people. But anyways, at the end of the day, just the security annoyed the hell out of me because, you know, why are they there if they let these kind of guys into get into the apartment building? So that was the second time where I felt, yeah, a bit insecure, like my security had been compromised here in Ukraine. First time I was getting drugged in Crimea. Second time the dodgy guy who was probably drugged himself on different type of narcotics following me to my apartment door in the building. And then apparently just crashing rough in the building afterwards. And then the third time didn't happen to me, but it's definitely a very pertinent story for you to listen up to. So there was a guy who was an American guy, and he came here to Ukraine. I'd actually met him, I think I met him socially. There was another Irish guy who I had spoken to in a bar or something, and then he introduced me to this American guy. And he was hanging out in Odessa down the south for the summer. Now, this is probably 2 or 3 years ago, and there was a period where there was a bit of an issue in the center of Odessa with gangs robbing tourists, and it actually happened to some Turkish guys that I know. They were actually in one of my Odessa summer vlogs, and actually also in one of my other videos from Lviv, and they got robbed outside of a club by a gang that was waiting for people coming out of the club. Also near the Yarmarkt in the center, just you know, you have Deribasovskaya, the main pedestrian street, or most of it's pedestrianized through the center, and you have a Yarmarkt, they're kind of like a little market with bars and kiosks there, and there was like some gangs hanging out there, from what I heard, who were like just targeting tourists. And police, it's right in the center, police station about 50 meters away, but nothing was been done about it. I haven't heard of these issues, at least in the last year and a half, so hopefully it's been improved. Now, he had booked a hotel right beside the Yarmarkt, and he was coming back from it. He had a bit of a verbal altercation with some guys who were waiting around, hanging around there, and then they decided to beat the crap out of him. They beat him so hard. You know, he needed to have a lot of surgery, corrective surgery on his face. Pretty horrific. He wrote me, and I came down and actually saw him at the time. We did discuss maybe doing an interview showing him in that state. He didn't feel comfortable. I said, don't worry about it. He actually told me recently, because I met him maybe about 6 months ago, that he, I guess in a way, regretted not just doing the interview, showing them what they had done. And it was a gang. You know, they were Ukrainians. The guy had some other ethnicity, but I don't remember. Some from the Caucasus. Not that all the gangs are from the Caucasus, but I had heard of some of them being from there, and some of them being from Ukraine itself or from other places. So basically, they beat the crap out of him. His face, when I saw it, it was a pretty horrific sight to see someone after been beaten to a pulp, his eyes split open and stuff like that. So really, really terrible what happened. And he was beaten within 50 meters of a police station. So the message there, I mean, there's so much more to say, that is beat him to a pulp. And you know, he went to the police. The police didn't show up, even though 50 meters away, for ages, if I remember. And eventually he obviously made a complaint. They tracked down who the guy was, because he was able to tell me, but in the end, no charges were brought against him. They had video footage from the hotel. Yeah, so really, really messy. Not only was he beaten up and obviously ruined his holiday experience here in Ukraine, it obviously had complications going forward for him. He needed a lot of corrective surgery. I did meet him, as I said, 6 months ago, and he looks fine aesthetically, so it worked from that point of view, but he wasn't able to prosecute him because of, it was strange that if he was caught on camera beating him up, that he wasn't able to prosecute him. So a few lessons out of this. Always check and see what's going on. I mentioned the guy the foreigner who was drugging other foreigners. Just always pay attention, get the intel, if there are any dodgy parts of the new city you come to. And Odessa said back when this happened, there was an issue with gangs targeting foreigners in particular around the center of Odessa, and the police didn't seem very effective in stopping them at that police station, because I know very well it's 50 meters away. So how can it not be taken care of if one of the main sources? And I actually felt it myself walking around at the time that it's just these dodgy groups of guys hanging out, and I had in my head, okay, when I see them on the corner, probably better to be a little bit further away from them than normal. So that's one thing to be very careful. The other thing is the police. I think that things have improved dramatically since 2014 in terms of security. Obviously, the revolution here. Before the police, I talked about time in Crimea, and the English guy Andy who told me his story about him having a problem in Crimea. The police were extremely corrupt back then. It was like a gang of thieves walking around in uniforms. Nowadays, you don't have. They don't shake down tourists like they used to do. That used to happen an awful lot when I first came to Ukraine. That doesn't happen. And I had once 50 euros stolen out of my pocket in a cafe here in Kiev, and the police came. They filled out paperwork. There wasn't much they could do with that. I mean, they saw this footage. They can't identify the guy. If they find someone else doing something similar, I guess, and they catch him in the act, then maybe they could have come back and done something. But they were definitely a lot more professional. Not speaking language is, of course, an issue in terms of explaining. Maybe in Kyiv you're going to get some police officers who do speak English, but in general it's going to be tricky. You might need an interpreter to go with you, and getting things resolved if you're not living here and not able to sort it out is pretty difficult at times. So in terms of, and Odessa doesn't have the best reputation for rule of law. Even in Ukraine, it's kind of the dodgy South port city. And has a reputation for more corruption than, say, in the west of Ukraine, where it's more law-abiding, I think, in general. Or here, it's kind of a mix in Kiev, what you hear. But just be aware that it's going to be hard, probably, if you're just in on a trip, to get it solved if you are obviously assaulted or robbed, because they were robbing. The two Turkish guys got robbed. They decided not to come back to Ukraine, which is a pity. So lessons for you out of the third one. I just felt like a little bit like I need to be extra careful, be wary of groups of guys. So again, it's about having the intel on what are the issues in that particular city or that particular area when you come here. Just do a little bit of research. Make sure you don't get caught up with something that, if you had researched it, that you could have avoided. Like all the romance scams, as I said, forearmed is forewarned, and that's the key to that. And yes, Ukraine does have a long way to go, I think, with the police and the rule of law. It is better, as I said, than when Yanukovych was president, or the presidents before, not just Yanukovych. But I remember regularly, if you're walking on the center of Kiev, group of policemen, what I used to do is, I saw a group of policemen, I walked the other way. This is back before 2014, because so many foreigners got shaken down for money here. They say, where's your document? Oh, you don't have your document, let's go to the police station. Oh, you have your document, let's go anyways and verify it, and then they steal it and stuff, and you end up paying money. So there are the 3 times that I think I felt a bit more wary of my security, even afraid. Maybe I'm exaggerating saying afraid. I think only the first time when I've been drugged, the whole thing was so bizarre. But definitely you need to be wary to a certain extent. As I preface this video with, Ukraine in general is not a dangerous country, I think, by European standards. Having lived in a lot of different parts of the continent, I think it's actually safer here. But just do your research and just be wary of your environments. Normal rules apply to going to any big city across the world. So I started the video by explaining my first trip and how basically naive I was, right? I mean, if you go and watch the rest of those podcasts, the ones my clients who live the Czar experience seem to enjoy the most, you'll find out that, I was pretty green. And, how did I overcome all that? Well, I came back and I spent more and more time here in Ukraine, And you know, at the time, back in the day, I was trying to figure out how can I spend more time in Ukraine. I had a job that was connected, obviously been in a location in Western Europe. I was living in Brussels, then later in Munich, but I really wanted to spend my time here. So I set it up eventually that I could go for a few months and then eventually live all the time in Eastern Europe in effect. So that is something that is becoming increasingly popular. I'd say in the last 18 months I've seen a growth. I mean, also coincided with the pandemic to a certain extent, but just before the pandemic started, more and more guys started reaching out to me, asking me, Connor, how do we come here and live, and what do we need to know, set up our lifestyle so that we actually spend, you know, normally at least a bit more than 3 months to a year here in Eastern Europe, because, well, first of all, you get visa free for 90 days every 180 as a Westerner here. And the question becomes, if you want to stay longer than the 90 days legally, what you need to do. So with that, I created Slavic Utopia Secrets Ukraine's my high-level consultation group for guys, high-level Western guys who want to spend 3 to 12 months per year in Ukraine. And I did 2 seasons of it already. It was pretty exciting for me to do and actually help all these guys who are coming here. Most of them are planning to buy an apartment, buy, well, at least an apartment, maybe not a house, maybe something else. They run businesses. Obviously, they all need to have their legal right to reside here, so within all the residency, and basically help them 5x their lifestyle by moving for part of the year, because not all the guys wanted to actually live here 12 months. Some of them were now fans of the Ukrainian winter. Obviously, now we're, well, late spring, early summer, and weather is pretty nice. But it's not for everybody to live here in the winters. I have a very good friend who always disappears in the winter and reappears in the summer. So it depends on the type of lifestyle you want to set up. But just being part of the group, never mind, obviously you go through, you know, the healthcare service, business opportunities here, overcoming the language barrier, because that is a different issue, as I've outlined in many of my videos, getting your residency, and obviously the real estate opportunities here and understanding the real estate market, because they are huge. Price of property here is a fraction compared to all cities in the West, basically. And the way to get in on that and join, because it's not just about that information, you also get to join our group. You're going to be able to network and connect with like-minded guys, high-level guys who are also doing the same thing. Create our own community is by enrolling in Slavic Utopia Secrets Ukraine. It's also on demand. Down below in the description, you'll see a link to that. And if you're not on my free mailing list, then you should be on that. It should be a no-brainer because it's free, and then you get notified of all my new programs going forward. So down below there is a link to my free mailing list, and you do go down there, click on the link, type in your email address, confirm that it's a real address, you're not a robot, and I whisk off to you as a free gift the Tsar's hotspots for Kiev, Odessa, and neighboring Minsk in Belarus. When I'm shooting this video, travel to Belarus has actually become a lot more difficult thanks to Lukashenko and his penchant for Ryanair flights. I mean, you know, I saw a good joke yesterday, a bit of a meme about, well, you know, now in the future you're going to have the option on the Ryanair, you know, when you're paying the option not to be abducted on your flight by the Belarusian authorities. So yeah, all that's happening. But anyways, if you are planning to go to Minsk, you also get those thrown in as well. And that is all I have to say in today's video. If you have been here to Ukraine, and if you have had some sort of dodgy experience, or maybe just you never had any problem, you've been coming here, let me know in the comment section below. I really enjoy reading those comments when guys share their experiences, because even I can learn some new things as well from your experience, and obviously all the guys who are reading the comments as well. So definitely share that down below. That is the end of today's vlogcast. Keep an eye out for some springtime vlogs. So I've actually been filming here in Kiev, also in the Dnipro, have that done. I might be able to get just the end of spring Kharkiv also done. Well, let's see if I make it there this weekend, and I will see you in the next video. Do побачення, до свидания from Kiev, not so dodgy Kiev, pretty safe and free Kiev, Ukraine. Ciao, ciao.
Tsar Experience.